The universe has a way of settling scores, a silent force that ensures no action goes without consequence. Those who throw thorns in your path will one day find themselves walking barefoot on a road paved with their own cruelty. It's the grand irony of life. Every dagger aimed at you was actually sharpening your armor. Every attempt to break you only made you unshakable. They thought they were pulling you down, but the weight they placed on your shoulders only built your strength. They laughed, dismissed, and plotted, thinking they were the architects of your downfall. But in reality, they were the laborers of their own destruction. The harder they pushed against you, the more the universe aligned in your favor. Because when you are chosen, every attack against you turns into fuel for your rise. It's a law, not a theory. You've seen it, the silent shifts, the uneasy glances, the ones who once doubted you now watching closely, too ashamed to admit they were wrong. The whispers of regret are getting louder, their own failures forcing them to acknowledge what they once ignored. It was never luck, it was never a coincidence, it was fate, meticulously aligning every setback, every betrayal, every obstacle to shape you into something unstoppable. And now, that realization haunts them. The moment has arrived. The truth they once ignored is now undeniable, and the weight of their regret is crushing them. The same people who laughed, doubted, and dismissed you are now haunted by the wisdom they refused to see. But this isn't about them, it's about you. The chosen ones don't chase validation, they become the proof. And right now, your presence is a force they can't escape. Before we dive into this revelation, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe. Because this space is for those who always knew they were different. Drop a 99 in the comments if you feel that shift happening. If you know deep down this message is for you. Stay until the end. Because once you hear this, you will never see yourself the same way again. Now, let's get into it. Number 1. Stop explaining yourself. They won't get it until it's too late. There's a burden that comes with being ahead of your time. A silent, exhausting battle that only the chosen ones understand. You saw reality before it revealed itself to the world. You warned them when they were too comfortable to listen. You spoke the truth when it was easier to pretend everything was fine. And for that, they didn't just dismiss you, they punished you. Not because you were wrong, but because you were early. It's a curse, isn't it? Knowing things before others are ready to accept them. Watching them stumble into mistakes you already predicted. Seeing them walk straight into fire while laughing at you for trying to warn them. It's like standing at the finish line, waiting for people who still think they're running in the right direction. They call you delusional, out of touch, crazy, but the truth. They fear what they don't understand. And then one day, the shift happens. The same people who ridiculed you now hesitate before speaking your name. Their arrogance is gone, replaced by uneasy silence. You see it in their eyes, that quiet recognition, the weight of their regret. They don't need to say it out loud. You already know. Life has humbled them in ways they never saw coming, and suddenly your wisdom isn't so funny anymore. But here's the part they won't admit. They always knew there was something about you. Deep down, they felt the power in your words. They heard the truth in your voice, but accepting it would have meant challenging everything they believed in. And that's the one thing they weren't willing to do. So instead, they chose to mock you, reject you, turn you into an outsider. because it was easier to paint you as the fool than to admit they were blind. And now they wish they had listened. But it's too late. Wisdom doesn't wait for slow learners. The moment has passed, and they're left with nothing but their own regret. They'll try to play it off like they knew all along, like they were just waiting for proof. But you don't need their recognition anymore. Because here's the truth. The chosen ones don't need validation. You don't need their late apologies, their sudden admiration, their whispered confessions of regret. They had their chance to stand with you, to understand you, to see the world through your eyes. And they failed. And failure always comes with a price. Now, as you move forward, stronger and wiser, they're stuck watching from the sidelines, forever haunted by the realization that they doubted the very person who could read them something good. And that's regrets they will carry forever. Number 2. Don't chase validation. Let the truth prove you right. They finally see it. The truth they fought so hard to deny is now standing in front of them, undeniable, unshakable. And you should feel victorious, right? After all the doubt, the mockery, the dismissals, this should be your moment. But it isn't. Because vindication doesn't feel like a celebration. It feels like a funeral. You spent so much time hoping they would understand, waiting for the day when they would finally open their eyes. And now that they do, it means nothing. Their regret is worthless because it comes too late. The damage has already been done. The bridges have already burned. The years of being cast aside, treated like you were the one who didn't get it, can't just be erased with a simple, "I should have listened." And the worst part, they expect things to go back to how they were, as if realizing their mistake wipes away the way they doubted you, as if their sudden respect now makes up for the years of isolation. But it doesn't. It never could. Because while they were busy rejecting you, dismissing you, making you feel like an outsider, you were changing. The struggle, the solitude, the pain, it shaped you into something they will never have access to again. So now, as they scramble to make sense of what you always knew, you don't feel the need to explain anymore. You don't need to rub it in. You don't need their apologies. And you sure as hell don't need their validation. If anything, you pity them. Because they weren't just rejecting you, they were rejecting the truth itself. And now they have to live with the knowledge that they had wisdom right in front of them and were too blind, too proud, or too arrogant to accept it. This isn't a victory. This is a graveyard of what could have been. The friendships that could have thrived, the connections that could have grown, the lives that could have been different, if only they had trusted you sooner. But they didn't. And now they will spend the rest of their lives haunted by the price of their own doubt. Number 3, : They knew you were right. They just couldn't handle it. They never ignored you because they didn't understand. No, they understood perfectly well. But to admit you were right, that would have shattered the illusions they built their lives around. It would have meant questioning everything, their choices, their beliefs, their identity. And that was too much for them to handle. So they did what weak minds always do when confronted with something too powerful to control. They dismissed you, they mocked you, they painted you as the fool, not because you were wrong, but because they couldn't afford for you to be right. You weren't just speaking words. You were exposing everything they were too afraid to confront. But deep down, they felt it. Every time you spoke, something in them shifted. A discomfort, a moment of hesitation, a fleeting second where they knew you weren't just talking, you were revealing the truth. And for a brief moment, they almost listened. Almost. But instead of leaning into that truth, they ran from it. Because accepting your wisdom meant admitting they had been living a lie. It meant acknowledging that their world wasn't as solid as they pretended it to be. And for most people, it's easier to cling to comforting delusions than to embrace a painful reality. But here's the twist. The truth doesn't need their permission to exist. It moves forward with or without them. And now, everything you warned them about is happening. Everything they ignored is unfolding in front of their eyes. And suddenly, the person they mocked, the one they called crazy, the one they doubted, you're the only one who saw it coming. And now, the regret isn't just about not believing you. It's about realizing they betrayed themselves. They had the chance to learn, to grow, to evolve. But their pride was more important than their progress. And now, instead of standing beside you, they're stuck watching from the sidelines, powerless, ashamed, and haunted by the realization that they turned their back on the one person who could have led them to something greater. But here's the best part. You don't need them. You never did. The chosen ones don't beg to be understood. You let time do the talking. And now, as they sit with the weight of their regret, you move forward, unshaken, unstoppable, and beyond their reach. Number 4. Never trust apologies fueled by regret, not change. Watch closely when they return with their apologies, because it's not about making things right. It's about making themselves feel better. They don't come back because they've suddenly grown, because they now understand the depth of their betrayal, or because they truly want to fix what they broke. They come back because the weight of their regret is crushing them. The truth they once ran from is now staring them dead in the face, and they can't bear to sit with it. They don't want justice, they want relief. They need you to wipe away their guilt, to nod and say, "It's okay. It doesn't matter anymore." But it does. It always did. Where was this concern when you were the one drowning in doubt? When they made you feel like you were wrong for seeing the truth too soon? When they dismissed your wisdom, mocked your insight, and left you standing alone? Back then, your pain was invisible to them. Your struggle meant nothing, because their comfort mattered more than your suffering. And now, nothing has changed, except that reality has humbled them. They finally see what you were trying to tell them, but they don't want to face the consequences of their ignorance. They just want an easy way out. And if you let them, they will use you as a stepping stone to free themselves from their own shame. They will unload their guilt onto you, hoping your forgiveness will lighten their burden. But here's what they don't want to hear. Not every apology deserves acceptance. Not every wound can be healed with a few words. Some betrayals cut too deep. Some mistakes don't get second chances. Now, the burden is theirs to carry, not yours. Let them feel the weight of what they did. Let them sit in the discomfort they tried to avoid, because your growth was built in the fire of their rejection, but their regret, that's a prison of their own making. And this time, you don't owe them the key. Number 5, People only respect wisdom after they pay the price for ignoring it. Wisdom is a strange thing. People don't recognize its value when it's given freely. When you warned them, they scoffed. When you tried to show them the way, they laughed. They acted as if your insight was just another opinion, something they could take or leave. They weren't ready to hear the truth, because in their minds, they didn't need it. Arrogance made them deaf, and ignorance made them blind. But life doesn't let people stay blind forever. Reality has a way of forcing lessons on those who refuse to listen. And when the consequences arrived, when the very disasters you warned them about became their reality, that's when everything changed. Suddenly, your words weren't just words anymore. They were keys they had thrown away. They were lifelines they had ignored. And now, drowning in their own mistakes, they finally see you for what you are. Not just someone who spoke, but someone who knew. Because that's the truth about wisdom. People don't respect it until it costs them something. They don't take it seriously until life makes them pay for ignoring it. Until they've lost, until they've suffered, until they've been forced to sit in the ruins of their own bad choices. Only then do they start searching for the truth you always carried. And now they want your wisdom. They want your guidance. They want the very thing they once dismissed. But here's where the real power of the chosen ones lies. You've already moved forward. You're not standing in the same place, waiting for them to catch up. You've evolved, grown, and elevated yourself beyond their reach. Because wisdom isn't for those who reject it. It's for those who choose to see it before it's too late. And for them, it is too late. Let them sit with the regret. Let them face the weight of their own decisions. Because you gave them the truth for free, and they threw it away. Now, they'll have to learn the hard way, on their own. Number 6. If they didn't believe when it mattered, they failed the test. Believing once the truth is obvious. That's not wisdom. That's just reacting to reality too late. Anyone can say they understand after the proof smacks them in the face, after life humbles them, after their comfortable illusions collapse. But the real test was whether they could see it before it was undeniable. Whether they had the discernment to recognize truth when it was still hidden, still uncomfortable, still something that demanded trust over evidence. And they failed, miserably, not because they were blind, but because they chose to be. You weren't speaking in riddles. You weren't spinning fantasies. You were handing them insight that could have spared them the suffering that was coming. You were offering them a shortcut, a lifeline, a way to avoid the storm. But they dismissed you. They questioned your judgment, mocked your perspective, laughed as if they knew better, as if their ignorance was something to be proud of. They bet on the comfort of their illusions instead of the discomfort of your truth. But now, reality has made the choice for them. Everything you warned them about is unfolding. Everything they doubted has become undeniable. And suddenly, they want to act like their past disbelief doesn't matter. They want to pretend that just because they finally see it now, everything is fine. But here's what they don't understand. Timing matters. Some doors only open for those who trust before they see. Some opportunities are reserved for those who believe when it's difficult, not when it's convenient. And because they failed that test, their realization now comes at a cost. While they were busy doubting, you were evolving. You kept moving forward while they stayed stuck in their arrogance. And now, The version of you they rejected no longer exists. They had their chance to believe before the world proved you right. They had a moment to stand beside you before life forced them to their knees. And they failed. And failure, chosen ones, always has consequences. Number 7. Your vision terrified them because it exposed their lies. They never ignored you because they didn't understand you. They ignored you because your vision was a threat, a direct challenge to the comfortable illusions they clung to. You weren't just speaking words, you were unraveling the false world they had built for themselves, and that terrified them. People don't reject wisdom because it's unclear. They reject it because it demands change. And change, that's what they feared the most. If they had truly listened to you, they would have had to admit that their beliefs, their choices, their entire way of thinking was flawed. And that was too much for their fragile egos to handle. So instead of facing reality, they turned their backs on you. They laughed at you, dismissed you, ridiculed you, because that was easier than admitting you were right. The truth wasn't the problem. You were. Your clarity, your insight, your ability to see through the illusions they relied on, it was dangerous to them. It forced them to look at themselves in a way they weren't ready for. So rather than question their own ignorance, they questioned you. Rather than confront the truth, they convinced themselves you were wrong, because believing you meant their entire world would have to crumble. And now, that world is falling apart anyway, not because they finally chose to see the truth, but because the truth never needed their permission to exist. The reality they denied is now undeniable, and they are standing in the wreckage of their own delusions. The very thing they mocked you for is now the only thing that could have saved them. But the difference is, you don't need them to see it anymore. Because here's the thing about vision. It was never meant for those who refuse to open their eyes. You weren't here to convince them. You weren't here to beg for their understanding. You were here to see beyond the noise, to walk a path they were too afraid to take. And now, as you rise, they are left behind, trapped in the very illusions they fought so hard to protect. Number 8. They mocked you because they feared you were right. They didn't just dismiss you, they laughed in your face. Your words weren't just ignored, they were turned into a joke. Your wisdom wasn't questioned, it was ridiculed. They rolled their eyes, whispered behind your back, and made sure you knew exactly where you stood, on the outside. It wasn't enough for them to walk away from your truth. They needed to destroy it. They needed to make an example out of you. Because as long as they could mock you, they didn't have to take you seriously. As long as they could turn your insight into something ridiculous, they didn't have to face the possibility that they were the ones who didn't understand. But look at them now. The laughter is gone. Their arrogance has crumbled under the weight of reality. The very words they mocked are now echoing in their heads. But this time, they hit differently, because now they see it. Now they understand. They thought they were tearing you down, but all they did was reveal their own ignorance. They thought they were making you look small, but all they did was expose their own weakness. And now they sit in silence. Not because they suddenly respect you, but because they're ashamed. It's not just regret. It's the unbearable realization that they made fools of themselves. They thought they were the ones who had it all figured out, but life has humbled them in ways they never saw coming. They mocked what they didn't understand. They ridiculed what they feared, and now they can't take it back. The words, the doubt, the laughter, it all exists in the past, exactly where they left you. But you've moved forward. You've outgrown them. They are stuck in their shame, and you are untouchable. Number 9. Stop looking back. You've outgrown the people who doubted you. They think they can walk back into your life like nothing happened. Like time erased the way they doubted you, dismissed you, and made you question your own worth. They assume that now that they see your wisdom, now that life has proven you right, they can just pick up where they left off. But they don't realize something crucial. The person they rejected is gone. The pain changed you. The isolation hardened you. The betrayal reshaped you in ways they will never understand. When they turned their backs on you, it didn't just hurt, it transformed you. You had no choice but to rebuild yourself from the ground up, to find strength in the silence, wisdom in the loneliness, and power in standing alone. And in doing so, you became something they can never reach again. Now, they look at you with wide eyes, realizing what they threw away. The same people who laughed at you, who whispered behind your back, who made you feel like you were nothing, they're the ones searching for a way back in. But what they don't understand is that the door they slammed in your face is no longer there. The version of you that would have welcomed them back, that would have forgiven without hesitation, no longer exists. They aren't mourning you, they're mourning what they lost. They're chasing a ghost, desperately trying to reconnect with a version of you that no longer lives here. They see your success, your growth, your undeniable presence, and it haunts them. Regret is a heavy burden, but it is theirs to carry, not yours. Because the truth is, their rejection was a blessing. Without their doubt, without their betrayal, you might never have stepped into your full power. Their absence forced you to rise alone, and in doing so, you became untouchable. Now, they want back in, not because they've changed, but because they finally see your worth. But it's too late. Some losses are permanent. Some doors, once closed, never reopen. Let them regret. Let them grieve. Let them wish they had seen you for who you were before life forced them to. But never let them think that they deserved the new you when they never valued you, the old you. Number 10. Some betrayals cut too deep. Never let them back in. There are wounds that time cannot heal, betrayals so deep that no apology, no amount of regret can undo them. The chosen ones don't just survive pain, we transform from it. But some scars remain, not as reminders of weakness, but as proof of the fire we walked through alone. And the people who put us there, they don't get a second chance. They finally see the truth now, but it changes nothing. When they laughed at you, when they mocked your wisdom, when they made you doubt your own mind, they weren't just wrong, they were cruel. They questioned your intelligence, your worth, your very existence, all because they weren't ready to accept that you saw what they couldn't. And now that the world has proven you right, they expect a clean slate. They expect you to welcome them back as if their betrayal never happened. But here's the reality. Some doors stay locked forever. Not because of bitterness, not because you're holding on to the past, but because some betrayals are unforgivable. They didn't just reject you, they rejected the truth you carried. And now that they need you, they want to pretend none of it ever happened. But the person they left behind, that person no longer exists. The one who once craved their approval, who longed for them to understand, who would have welcomed them back with open arms. Gone. In their absence, you became something greater, stronger, wiser, untouchable. And they don't get access to the version of you that rose from the ashes of their doubt. Regret is not redemption. Feeling bad doesn't erase what they did. They had their chance to stand with you when it mattered, and they failed. Now, let them sit with their regret. Let them replay their mistakes over and over, knowing they lost something they will never get back. Some bridges deserve to burn. Some people deserve to watch from the sidelines, knowing they will never be part of your life again. That is the price of doubting a chosen one. And that is their regret. Number 11. The real ones never needed proof, they just knew. Not everyone needed proof. Not everyone was blind. While the crowd mocked, doubted, and dismissed you, there were a few, maybe just one or two, who saw you for who you truly are before the world caught up. These are the ones who matter. Because real ones don't wait for validation. They don't need life to prove you right before they believe in you. They saw your power when no one else did. When it would have been easier to laugh along with the masses, they stood by you. When it would have been safer to remain silent, they chose you. Not because the evidence was laid out before them, but because they had the wisdom to see beyond the surface. That's what separates the ones who truly belong in your life from the ones who were only ever waiting to see which way the wind would blow. And now, look at them. The ones who left, the ones who doubted, the ones who needed undeniable proof before they could recognize your wisdom. They thought they were smart, playing it safe, choosing skepticism over belief. But life has humbled them. Now that the truth is staring them in the face, they scramble to rewrite the past. They act like they always knew, like they just needed time to understand. But you remember who laughed, who whispered, who walked away. They only believe now because it's convenient, because it costs them nothing. But when it did cost something, when standing beside you meant going against the crowd, they failed. They chose comfort over courage. And that's why they don't get to stand beside you now. Let them regret. Let them wish they had seen it sooner. Let them carry the weight of knowing they had a chance to believe in you before the world forced them to. That's a burden they will carry forever. But you don't owe them anything. Your energy, your loyalty, your presence, it belongs to the ones who never needed proof. The ones who always believed. The ones who saw your worth from the beginning and never wavered. Those are the only people who deserve a place in your future. The rest, let them drown in their regret. Number 12. Their regret doesn't mean they're ready for the truth. They regret doubting you. The same voices that once dismissed you have softened, their arrogance now replaced with uncertainty. But don't mistake their regret for true understanding. They see now that you were right, but they still aren't ready for the full weight of your wisdom. They listen, but only to what's convenient. They acknowledge your insight, but only to the extent that it doesn't force them to change. Your wisdom was never meant to be comfortable. It was never designed to fit inside their limited perception of reality. True wisdom shakes people. It challenges their beliefs, exposes their weaknesses, and demands growth. And growth, that's the part they fear the most. Now they nod where they once laughed. They admit you had a point where they once rolled their eyes. But the moment you go deeper, the moment you push beyond their comfort zone, that hesitation returns. The fear, the denial, the resistance, it never really left. Because the truth is, your wisdom still terrifies them. It asks too much. It demands that they tear down the illusions they've built their identity around. So, what do they do instead? They cherry-pick. They take only the surface-level truths, the ones that don't disrupt their comfortable little world. They pretend to listen while secretly filtering out the parts that would force them to change. And that's how you know they still don't value your insight. They just regret the consequences of ignoring it. Because real wisdom, it's not just something you acknowledge, it's something you surrender to. It requires sacrifice, transformation, and the ability to let go of everything that no longer serves you. And most people, they aren't built for that. They want wisdom without the discomfort, truth without the responsibility, growth without the struggle. So let them pretend. Let them act like they've evolved while still clinging to their old ways. But you're beyond their reach now. Your wisdom is not for those who only want to listen when it's easy. It's for those willing to embrace it fully, no matter the cost. And the ones who still resist, they were never meant to walk this path with you. Number 13. Watch out, they'll try to rewrite the past to save face. Watch closely, because the moment they realize how wrong they were, they will try to rewrite history. They won't sit with the shame of their mistakes. They won't admit how they doubted you, mocked you, or dismissed you when you stood alone. No, that would be too painful. Instead, they'll twist the story, reshape the past, and soften their betrayal until it's easier for them to live with. They'll say, "I always had a feeling you were right." But if that were true, they wouldn't have rolled their eyes. They wouldn't have whispered behind your back. They wouldn't have acted like you were the fool while they sat comfortably in their ignorance. That feeling they claim to have had is nothing more than a desperate attempt to save face. Now that the truth is too obvious to deny, they're scrambling for a way to make themselves look better. They'll say, "I just needed more time to understand." But back then, they weren't trying to understand. They weren't open. They weren't willing to see past their own arrogance. It wasn't about needing more time. It was about not wanting to believe you. Because believing you would have meant questioning themselves, and that was something they were never strong enough to do. Some will even go further. They'll try to convince you that they were never against you at all. "I never doubted you. I was just waiting for things to play out." Lies. You remember the looks. You remember the way they laughed at you, the way they made you feel like you were crazy, like you were the one who didn't understand. You don't need their confession. You don't need their guilt-driven revision of the past. You already know the truth. And now their regret is eating them alive. But instead of owning their failure, they'd rather rewrite the story. Pretend they were always in your corner. But let them twist the past all they want. Let them rewrite the narrative in their minds if it helps them sleep at night. It changes nothing, because the truth remains. You were right, they were wrong, and when it mattered most, they failed the test. Number 14. You don't need their approval. You've already won. There was a time when their approval might have mattered, when their recognition could have softened the road you had to walk alone, when just one voice standing beside you could have made all the difference. But that time is gone. Now, their sudden realization, their regret, their shift in perspective, it means nothing. Because while they took their time doubting you, you were busy outgrowing the need for their validation entirely. That's the irony. They think their acknowledgement is some grand moment, like their belief in you now makes up for all the times they rejected you. They expect this to be a full circle moment, where their regret bridges the gap and you welcome them back with open arms. But to you, it's just noise. Too little, too late. They don't realize that the version of you they doubted no longer exists. Their rejection, their mockery, their disbelief, it didn't break you. It didn't weaken you. It forced you to become untouchable. It pushed you to step into your power without their approval, to sharpen your wisdom without their validation, to evolve into someone who no longer waits for others to catch up. And that's what truly haunts them. It's not just that they were wrong, it's that their realization came at a cost they can't undo. They will try to soften their betrayal, to rewrite the past, to act like they always saw your potential. But you remember how they looked at you, how they whispered, how they dismissed you like you were nothing. And now, they sit with their regret while you walk forward without them. The ones who mattered never needed proof. The ones who were real never left. And the ones who doubted you, let them sit with it. Let them wish they had seen it sooner. Let them live with the knowledge that they had a chance to stand beside you before the world proved you right. And they failed. And so the cycle completes itself. The same ones who doubted you, who mocked your wisdom, who cast you aside, now struggle under the weight of their own regret. But here's the truth, chosen one. You never needed their belief. You never needed their approval. The path was always yours to walk, and now, as you move forward, they are the ones left behind. Let them regret. Let them watch. You rise. If this message hit home, show your presence. Like this video, subscribe and comment 99 below. Let the world know the chosen ones are unstoppable.